Welcome to the fourth seminar of Schwegman, Lundberg, and Woosner's Life Sciences Seminar Series. I am Nicholas Lanzatella, your moderator for the series. During this series, attorneys from the SLW law firm having a background in chemistry or biology will present on various topics in the life sciences in patent law. If you attend 3 or more of these presentations live and you live in the US, we will send you a free gift. Slides for today's presentation will be available in the chat and a link will be emailed to you. As a reminder, nothing in today's presentation should be regarded as legal advice. If you are seeking legal advice, please consult your legal counsel. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker for today, my colleague, Janal Kalis. Janal is a principal at the firm and is a patent attorney with experience in chemical engineering, chemical and mechanical patent law, including extensive experience drafting and prosecuting patents for chemical engineering processes, food products, cosmetics, coatings, and medical devices throughout the world. Janal received a Bachelor's of Science in Biochemistry from the University of Minnesota, as well as a Bachelor's in Chemical Engineering from the University of Minnesota. She received her law degree from the University of Utah. Prior to entering law school, Janal worked for many years as a research scientist in the area of virology and as a chemical engineer in the electrical utility industry. Janal has significant experience in counseling clients on the development and enforcement of their intellectual property portfolios. She also has experience in the preparation and negotiation of contracts for technology licensing and joint development. The title of today's presentation is What We Can Learn About Technology Landscapes from Patent Citation Analyses, Case Study of Lithium-Ion Battery Patents. If you have any questions during the presentation today, please put these in the Q&A and the speaker will answer these during the presentation. And the Q&A is the button right at the bottom of your screen that's labeled Q&A. So please put your questions there and we'll make sure they are answered. Okay, go ahead, Janelle.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you also, Michelle. And thank you, audience, for taking the time to perhaps learn a little bit or get a review in patent citation analysis. This is going to be a fairly simple review, not terribly sophisticated, but hopefully it will be of value to especially younger practitioners. And we're going to study citation analysis in the context of lithium-ion battery patents. And I'm going to be discussing particular scientists and engineers in the field, but it should be recognized that there are many, many people who are involved in the development of lithium-ion batteries that will not be mentioned today just for lack of time. But we owe all of them the appreciation for what they've done. And as a little bit of background, backward citations are patents that are cited in a patent and that were considered by a USPTO examiner in prosecuting a patent application. It can also include published patent applications in addition to patents. The cites are typically on the face of the patent. And backward citations, I would recommend, are important to check very closely every time that the examiner cites them. Look at the owner of the patent to determine whether it's a competitor. Look at the claims of the patent to make sure that you're not inadvertently stumbling into claims of a competitor's patent, that you didn't see coming. It won't happen very often, but if and when it does, you will want to know in advance rather than after the competitor sends you a cease and desist letter. And also I would recommend tracking backward citations of all patents within a particular family or a particular technology area so that you can get some idea locally of where you may be bumping into competitors' patent portfolios, or in particular areas of their portfolios. That'll give you a better understanding of the landscape of patent technology, patented technology that you're dealing with. And again, it'll give you an opportunity to see whether you're close to what your competitors are doing or not. And also look at who the competitors are. If it's a single individual that you had no knowledge of, and they have an active patent, not expired or abandoned patent application, that has claims which are of interest to you, there may be some benefit in contacting that individual to see whether they would license the patent, or whether you could actually buy it from them. I would tread carefully here, but there may be some benefit to doing that. If it's a large company, and what the information will tell you is that you are in direct competition with them, and you need to then take the proper action with respect to commercializing any products, but do it knowing kind of what you're getting into before it happens, rather than when you get a cease and desist letter citing one or more patents. So that's the benefit of tracking and studying backward patent citations, especially during the course of examination of a patent application. Forward citations are patents citing an issued patent or a published application. They can be found in databases like Derwent. That's the database I use. I believe that the USPTO also tracks forward citations. And the USPTO database is preferable to use because of the penalties for not citing material prior art. You may get more prior art than you need, but you should get all of the relevant prior art that any of the parties knew about. Next slide. Okay, so these are not, some of these are red flags, some of them are not so much red flags, but they are sort of rules of thumb about ratios of forward to backward citations. Now, forward to backward citations, it's a dynamic number. It changes over time, certainly. And when a patent is initially issued, it's going to be mainly backward citations. It's going to usually, or it may take a while to get forward citations. So as mentioned, for backward citations, always check the claims to make sure that a product being commercialized does not infringe claims in patents in backward citations. Like I say, this is an area that you have some control over. You can identify during prosecution before a patent issues, and hopefully before commercialization. A second situation is backward citations are much larger than forward citations. And this will be something that you will see over time. And for this, what this shows is that you've jumped into an area of art that may be somewhat crowded, and that you're not the invention that you have that is being cited, and that you are citing from. It may not be that great of an invention. It may have great commercial viability, but in terms of the larger landscape of patents, it's at best an incremental improvement in a very crowded field. But a large number of backward citations to forward citations also indicates that it's very important to police commercialization of your own products, to make sure that they do not fall within a problem of infringement of any of these backward cited patents. If you've got a situation of backward citations are about equal to forward citations, here your invention can be considered to be an incremental improvement. This is what the patent system was really designed to protect. And it's what most of the patent applications that I've prosecuted over the years, this is the group that they've fallen into. And then the other group, this is the group that we'll mainly be discussing today. And this is one where forward citations greatly exceed backward citations. And in this case, the invention may be a blockbuster. And I guess one other question is whether there's any way of quantifying these ratios of backward to forward citations in order to determine significance of an invention. And I don't know what that would be. I don't have an actual numerical range for determining what would be a blockbuster or something like that. It's kind of touchy-feely. Next slide. Okay, the options for studying citations. The one that we're going to consider today is mapping by patent owner. This can give you an idea within a playing area who your competitors are based upon the patents that they are obtaining. And it can also show you the technology areas that your own invention may be of consequence in. And that may or may not be unexpected, but that's one reason why mapping based upon citation can be quite interesting. Another map is by inventors, and these are the inventors listed on patents. And this can be really interesting, especially for emerging areas of technology, because you'll be able to see who is kind of cross-pollinating what combination of inventors are achieving what kind of results technologically. And that can be quite fascinating. And the third type of map is to map directly by independent claims. And that gets more to the heart of what is technically known and invented in any particular patent, and how that incremental invention is used later on, perhaps in other technology areas, perhaps in the same area. Next slide. Okay, we're gonna look at this type of patent mapping in the context of the development of the lithium-ion battery. And I thought this would be interesting because it's relatively recent. I mean, I was in engineering school while this was going on in the 1970s. So it's contemporary for me. And many of the inventors are still alive. In fact, one of them, he lived to be 100, and he just passed away within the past couple of years. Okay, so the story starts in the Exxon lab of M. Stanley Whittingham in the early 1970s. Next slide. Whittingham developed a battery with a titanium disulfide cathode and a liquid electrolyte that used lithium ions. So you can see the titanium disulfide. The anode was a metallic lithium, which made the battery a little bit unstable and maybe not completely safe to use. Next slide. Okay, Whittingham's battery was regarded as new and unobvious. He got several patents on it, and it worked by inserting ions into an atomic lattice of a host electrode material. The battery was both rechargeable and very high in energy output. Before the Whittingham battery, the best rechargeable battery had been nickel cadmium, which put out a maximum of 1.3 volts. Whittingham's battery produced 2.4 volts. Next slide. Okay, Exxon did invest in the battery. Exxon began manufacturing a coin cell lithium battery, and a Swiss watch manufacturer, Ebach, used the cells in a solar charging wristwatch. Next slide. Okay, Exxon filed a first patent application on this battery called the Chalcogendi battery. It was a continuation in part of a continuation in part, and filed April 5th, 1976. And Mr. Whittingham was the sole inventor. Next slide. What it claimed was a battery comprising an anode containing as the anode active material a metal selected from a group consisting of group 1A metals, group 1B metals, 2A metals, 2B metals, 3A metals, 4A metals, and mixtures containing the aforesaid, such that the aforesaid metals can be electrochemically released from the mixtures, a cathode with the sole cathode active material consisting of essentially of a layered chalcogenide of the formula MZX, where M is an element selected from the group consisting of titanium, zirconium, hafnium, niobium, tantalum, and vanadium. Z is an element selected from the group consisting of sulfur, selenium, tellurium, and X is a numerical value between 1.8 and 2.05, or alloys of the aforesaid chalcogenide with one another, said chalcogenide having a structure which will permit intercalcation therein by ions of the anode active material and an electrolyte which does not chemically react with said anode or said cathode, and which will permit migration of ions from said anode active material to intercalate said cathode active material. Next slide. Okay, the forward and backward citations of this pioneer patent were, it had 3 backward citations. 2 were from Bell Telephone, and 1 was from Mallory and Company, which is a battery company, a forerunner of Duracell. It had 157 forward citations, these citations include 8 from Duracell, 23 from Medtronic, and 13 self-citations from Exxon. And there were others too, but these were probably the main ones. What's interesting here is there were no Japanese companies that cited this first patent. So the lithium ion universe had not come up at all on the Japanese company screens. But one company that did cite this Whittingham patent 23 times, or in 23 of its own patents, was Medtronic. That was a little unexpected. Medtronic is, of course, in the business of making pacemakers. And in 1975, some Medtronic pacemakers with mercury batteries shorted out. Now, no one was killed, no one was seriously injured, but it was a big problem for the company, which was post-startup, but not really in a stable operating setting yet. So these failures were a very big deal to Medtronic, and it became important for them to start thinking about developing their own battery or energy storage source. Next slide. Okay, Medtronic did eventually develop its own lithium-ion battery, but in 1970, now this was before the mercury battery problem, Medtronic saw that batteries were a game changer. It was gonna, it was a bet the company move for them, and they needed to find a good solid energy storage source, and they explored a nuclear power. And in 1970, in a collaboration with Alcatel, they developed and implanted a nuclear-powered pacemaker. The nuclear battery in the Medtronic device used a tiny slug of metallic plutonium. The radiation produced by the plutonium-238 bombarded the walls of its container, producing heat that a thermopile then converted to an electric current. Next slide. Okay, the nuclear-powered material pacemaker developed by Medtronic and Alcatel. Like say, it was installed into a human subject, and she had that pacemaker for quite a few years before switching to a more normal pacemaker. But it actually worked out pretty well for her. But I believe that was the only patient that ever received a nuclear-powered pacemaker. Next slide. So Exxon got out of the business of making batteries. In the early 1970s, Exxon scientists predicted that global oil production would peak in the year 2000 and then fall into a steady decline. By the late 1970s, Exxon's interest in oil alternatives had waned, and Exxon thought Whittingham's concept was unlikely to ever be broadly successful. So they washed their hands of lithium titanium disulfide batteries. This technology then languished for the next 15 years. Next slide. The handoff then went to John Goodenough and Koichi Mizushima at Oxford University. Next slide. In 1980, Goodenough and Mizushima improved on Whittingham's design, replacing titanium disulfide with lithium cobalt oxide. The new chemistry boosted the battery's voltage by another 2/3 to 4 volts. Next slide. Okay, and here's a schematic of the Goodenough and Mizushima battery. You can see the cobalt oxide. They're using the same anode as was used in the Whittinghouse battery, but this was a fairly revolutionary design. Next slide. Goodenough asked the University of Oxford to pay for a patent for this extraordinary battery, but Oxford declined. Oxford's position was that it did not concern itself with IP, believing such matters to be confined to the commercial world. Goodenough visited the Atomic Energy Research Establishment, AERE, a government lab in Harwell, UK, about 20 kilometers from Oxford. The lab agreed to bankroll the procurement of the patent, but only if Goodenough signed away his rights. And his co-inventor also had to sign his rights. Goodenough complied. The lab patented the Goodenough battery in 1981, but because he has signed away his rights, Goodenough never saw a penny of the original battery's licensing earnings. The AERE then filed the patent away and forgot about it until they were contacted by Sony 8 years later. Next slide. Okay, and there are actually more patents than this. There is a larger portfolio, but the first 2 patents, US patents, procured for Goodenough and the Atomic Research Energy Agency. The first one is US 4302518, an electrochemical cell with a new fast ion conductors. And this has a joint inventorship. It was filed March 31st, 1980, claiming priority to a UK application. Next slide. Okay, the 518 patent protected crystalline compounds which promoted a fast alkali metal ion transport, including those with a formula of what they call the NAS icons, an acronym for sodium superionic conductor. And claim 1 of this blockbuster patent is listed below. And as you can see, it's a really short claim. And this is like the $100 million patent claim. I don't know how many dollars per word, but it would be quite a few. Next slide. Okay, this the 518 patent had 3 backward citations, a DuPont patent, a GE patent, and a Bell patent, and 167 forward citations. And now we start to see that this patent got the attention of Japanese companies. Matsushita had 11 patents citing to this patent, and Matsushita was in the business of making batteries. Semiconductor Energy had 35 patents citing the Goodenough et al. Patent, and Semiconductor Energy makes transistors and semiconductors. And what's kind of interesting here is Medtronic did not cite the Goodenough et al. Patent in any of its battery-based patents. Next slide. Okay, so this is one type of citation map, and you can see the 518 Goodenough et al. Patent there with the backward citations from DuPont, GE, and Bell. You can see that 35 semiconductor energy patents cited back to the Goodenough et al. Patent, and 2 companies, Microsoft and Toyota, cited to 1 or more of the semiconductor energy patents. And this is in regard to electronic vehicles. So they would have been cited later. They weren't cited in the 1980s or 90s, but in the 2000s. The 2000s. And so the technology then jumped from straight energy storage, just batteries, to semiconductors and energy, semiconductors and transistors, to electronic or electric vehicles. Another company, a Japanese company, Matsushita, which became Panasonic, was consumer electronics. And they had 11 patents citing to the Goodenough et al. Patent, and other companies citing off of the 1 or more patents in the Matsuda portfolio, where Murata is in the electric components business. In particular, they make and made capacitors. The University of Osaka was looking to improve Goodenough et al.'s design. 3M was looking at materials for making these lithium-ion batteries. JX Nippon is in the mining business, so they were engaged in lithium mining and were citing the Matsushita patents. LG Chem was in the polymer business, and they were also looking at components. And Medtronic did not cite directly to the Goodenough et al. Patent, but it cited to at least 1 of these Matsushita Panasonic patents. So you can start to see the ripple effect of these blockbusters, how they rippled from capacitors to automobiles to new mining techniques, which is kind of interesting. Next slide. A second patent. Now, in Europe, this was combined into a single product and process patent. In the United States, even in the 1980s, they were restricted out and got separate patents for the process and the product. And the 215 patent is the process patent. Again, joint inventorship. Next slide. Okay, and this is a method of making an ion conductor of the formula AXMYO2, having particular layers. But again, this is another blockbuster patent, probably at least $100 million. And each word is probably very expensive. Next slide. Okay, and there were, again, 3 backward citations for the process patent, 53 forward citations, which is kind of interesting that there were a lot more forward citations for the product patent than for the process patent. Samsung, which would be electronics, again, Matsushita, and Medtronic, Motorola, and Asahi. We're going to be talking about Asahi in a moment, and MIT, which is always looking at improving the core design. Next slide. Okay, now Goodenough et al. Obtained a patent for a new cathode material, which is in the European patent number was this 0017400. It was granted in 1984 with siblings granted in Japan and the United States. The patents were owned by the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority, whose site in neighboring Harwell had provided funding to the Oxford team. The patent application filing date was in 1980. However, commercialization of lithium-ion batteries took another 10 years with the invention of graphite anodes. Next slide. Okay, next up, Akira Yoshino and Asahi Glass. Next slide. Akira Yoshino had independently begun to investigate using a plastic anode made from electroconductive polyacetylene in a battery and was looking for a cathode to pair with it. Yoshino paired Goodenough's cathode with a plastic anode, a carbon-based anode made from petroleum coke. Next slide. Okay, and so Yoshino developed a safer lithium battery, one that could finally be commercialized. So he didn't make any changes from the Goodenough et al. Cathode, but he completely changed the anode to petroleum coke. Next slide. The choice of petroleum coke turned out to be a major step forward. Whittingham and Goodenough had used anodes made from metallic lithium, which was volatile and even dangerous. By switching to carbon, Yoshino and his colleagues had created a battery that was far safer. Still, there were problems. For one, Asahi Chemical was a chemical company, not a battery maker. No one at Asahi Chemical knew how to build production batteries at commercial scale, nor did the company own the coating or winding equipment needed to manufacture batteries. The researchers had built a crude lab prototype. Next slide.
Janal, quick question.
Yep.
One interesting thing I notice is that so many of these 1980s patents originate from Japanese companies, and yet that original Exxon patent, even though it had 156 forward citations, you noted that there were no Japanese companies at all in those forward citations. I was just wondering what do you think? How do you explain that? Do you think the technology just wasn't widely known at the time and Japanese companies hadn't picked up on it, or is another answer possible? Is there a gap in citation data possible? I think is a question. How complete is the Derwent database for Japanese patents in like the 1960s, 1970s?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think and that may be the entire story. I mean, I honestly don't know, but I think that it might have something to do with the like a combustion that occurred with advancements in electronic devices, semiconductors and transistors that occurred simultaneously with the development of this lithium-ion battery. I think there was suddenly a huge need for small energy storage devices that had a long usable lifetime. And I think the Medtronic example it kind of illustrates that point. The pacemaker was a new product, relatively speaking, and it lived or died by its energy storage. Medtronic knew that. Other medical device companies had the same problem, but it wasn't just in medical devices. It was also in other electronic devices run by that required batteries. In fact, the first commercial product in which the lithium-ion battery was used was a camcorder. So I think it may be exactly, it may have nothing to do with that. I'm just guessing, to be honest with you. Yeah. So it may be entirely availability of the patent applications, but it may also be that, perhaps even coupled with advancements in new products, new electronic products that required energy storage devices that were much more reliable than was presently in the marketplace.
I see.
Yeah, so the Yoshino patent 595 was the initial filings, as Nicholas mentioned, were Japanese, but it was filed in the United States in 1986. Next slide. And the claim 1 of this patent was a secondary battery comprising positive and negative electrode separator, non-aqueous electrolyte, wherein said secondary battery is characterized as having an active material for either of said positive and negative electrodes. The composite oxide possessing a layer structure and represented by the formula AXMYN2O2. And then they go on into the particular materials and confirmation that the material must have. Next slide. Okay, now this one was a blockbuster because it was a commercial product, and it enabled a ton more other commercial product. So it had 3 backward citations, all good enough and good enough et al. Patents, and 288 forward citations. Next slide. Okay, Semiconductor Energy Lab cited the Asahi 595 patent in 35 of its patents. Sony cited 595 in 3 of its patents, and Medtronic cited 595 in 9 of its patents. Next slide. Okay, and here you can see the 595 patent, the good enough patents that it cited, and then Medtronic cited this patent, and then drafting off of Medtronic were Boston Scientific, Cardiac Pacemakers, and Hendrix. Valence Tech, which is in the business of metal finishing, and a company called Innobel was drafting off of Valence Tech, and they were also in this finishing business. A123, now that has a really interesting history. I'm not going to discuss it today, but that is really interesting. That was a United States company that was bought by the Chinese, and they are in the lithium-ion battery business. Fostech is in the battery business, and again, those Medtronic references are duplicates, but you can also see Semiconductor Energy Labs also cited the Asahi patent and the Microsoft Toyota patents cited off of them. So again, you start to see the ripple effect through technology areas where they had been, they had an empty slot that was stopping the technology. And with the Asahi patent, that slot was filled and they could move forward. And what was cool for Asahi is, even though Asahi did not have the means to make the product themselves, they had the patent that they could license to other companies, and they did. And they, I don't know how much money they made off of it, but probably a lot more than it cost to invent it. So I think it worked out pretty well for them. Next slide. So no one at Asahi Chemical knew how to build production batteries at a commercial scale, nor did the company own the coating or winding equipment needed to manufacture batteries. Asahi Chemical hired Battery Engineering, a small firm based in a converted truck garage in Hyde Park in Boston. The company was run by a small group of PhD scientists who were experts in the construction of unusual batteries. Kuribayashi of Asahi flew to Boston in June of 1986, showing up at Battery Engineering unannounced with 3 jars of slurry, one containing the cathode, one the anode, and the third the electrolyte. They asked company co-founder Nicholas Lanzatella to turn the slurries into cylindrical cells like the kind someone might buy for a flashlight. Next slide. Okay, and here's a picture of Mr. Marinchik in his lab. Next slide. Marinchik charged $30,000, which would be about $83,000 in today's dollars, to build a bunch of batteries. 2 weeks later, Kuribayashi and his colleague departed for Japan with a box of 200 C-size cells. Kuribayashi said to Marinchik, "If you want to build the batteries, then don't ask any more questions." And that was basically his non-disclosure agreement. Kuribayashi and his colleagues further stipulated that Marinchik tell no one about their battery. Even Marinchik's employees didn't know until 2020 that they had participated in the construction of the world's first pre-production lithium-ion cells. Marinchik obtained a patent on a lithium-ion battery with carbon-based cathodes that issued in 1996, and it had and it was US 514492. It had 93 forward and 11 backward citations. Next slide. So Kuribayashi showed the prototype batteries to engineers in Sony's camcorder division in 1987. The Sony engineers saw the value of the prototype batteries immediately. Yoshio Nishi's team at Sony developed binders, electrolytes, separators, and additives for making a commercial battery. One patent from this group is US 4959281. Next slide. Okay, the 281 patent had 6 backward citations citing Sharp, Asahi, Sanyo, and Mitsubishi, and 97 forward citations citing the University of Texas. Those are good enough patents, Gillette, and Hydro-Quebec. Next slide. Okay, so in 1989, about 8 years after issuance, Sony, this is issuance of the good enough patent, Sony called the AERE and asked about good enough's cathode patents. Sony was interested in obtaining a license. Executives at the AERE did not understand why Sony was interested, but did grant a license to Sony. Sony introduced the battery in 1991 in camcorders and then cell phones. AERE reaped at least $50 million and perhaps over $100 million in royalties. Next slide. Okay. None of the original investigators, Whittingham, Goodenough, or Yoshino, received a cut of the profits, but all 3 shared the 2019 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Next slide. And here's a picture of the three pioneers in the area of lithium-ion battery technology. And I think they're all unsung heroes, especially John Goodenough. Once he moved from Oxford to the University of Texas, he engaged in research until the end of his life. I believe that he still has patent applications pending before the United States Patent Office. I think he probably was inventing stuff up until the very end. And I wish more people knew about him, because I think he's one of the giants of the United States in terms of the scientific community and even the general community. That, although that's nothing to take away from the other two great inventors. So I think that's all I had. Are there any questions?
Janal, what a fascinating story.
Oh, thank you.
We do have another question from the attendees here, and it's kind of a general question about what forward citations are. So the question is, are forward citations always aligned with the claims of the patent being cited? And how often do these citations occur due simply to unclaimed disclosed subject matter in the cited patent?
Okay. Somewhat, a forward citation is probably not necessarily closely aligned with the claims. It's going to be more closely aligned with the spec. If there are embodiments within the spec that are not necessarily claimed, but the reference is considered material, then it's going to be a backward citation to one party and a forward citation to another. So it does amount to the idea of what is claimed, what is disclosed. Is it material to the claims in the subsequent patent application? But that question is going to be asked the next generation down as well. So forward citations are based upon a belief that there is a material relationship between both of the patents, the forward and backward.
That makes sense, because it's the claims of the patent doing the citing that are searched in order to generate those forward citations.
Yes.
We have another question here. The question is, do we have a sequel for this? Since now we are on to lithium phosphate batteries, and the Chinese have stepped into this area, largely built on Goodenough's legacy. So do you have more potential presentations on battery technology about the sort of the hot stuff that's coming up now?
Oh, I don't at the moment, but I would be happy to consider it, because I think it's fascinating technology, and it's very contemporary. And this is kind of where the A123 company comes in. This was really disgusting. Our tax dollars went to develop this new A123 battery, which was a type of a lithium ion battery. And A123 fell into bankruptcy, and a Chinese company was allowed to purchase it. So the technology went to China.
We have another question, and it's regarding the last map that you showed. I think it was slide 37. And the question is, basic question, please explain how to read this map step by step. Yes, and I think that's the correct map there.
Okay. So we can start with, we want to start with the patent 595, 4668595. And you can see that there are now this is a misspelling. The good energy should be good enough. So there are three good enough patents that were cited by 595. So 595 is a forward citation to each of these good enough patents, and the good enough patents are backward citations to 595. Okay, so semiconductor energy then has 35 patents that cited the 595 patent. So the semiconductor energy patents are forward citations to 595, and 595 is a backward citation to each of these 35 patents. Similarly for Sony, three of the Sony patents cited the 595 patent, and 595 is a backward citation to the Sony to these three Sony patents, and that's the first generation. Now for the second generation, I took a look at the 35 semiconductor energy patents that cited 595, and I saw that Microsoft and Toyota both stood out as citing multiple patents in this group of 35. So Microsoft and Toyota don't necessarily directly cite 595, but they cite one or more patents in the semiconductor energy group. And similarly for the next generation out.
Janal, when you generate these maps, do you ever look at the temporal aspect of the forward backward citation?
Yes.
And how many of the forward citations are in the 5 to 10 year range?
Yep.
For example, how does that affect the analysis?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And that shakes out kind of by technology area, where for the battery area, like the semiconductor energy patents appeared pretty quickly after 595 issued, because the need was there immediately. They saw that they could commercialize it and make money pretty quickly. They could make the transitions that they needed to make in their own products that would receive the new battery. And so that would happen pretty fast. But for Medtronic and the medical devices, it actually took a little bit longer. I think perhaps because these are medical devices, it took probably at least 10 years to start seeing these sites show up. And while the semiconductor energy sites appeared pretty quickly after issuance of 595, the Microsoft and Toyota sites did not. They appeared maybe 15 years after 595. So that's a really good question. Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Here's another general question, less related to the forward-backward citation and more related to the technology. And that is, the question is, has anyone ever invented a leak-proof battery? And I'm guessing you've seen at least a few claims toward designs that minimize leaking.
Yeah, but I haven't really studied that area in great detail. I'm sure that there are, though, but I don't really have any useful information on that at this time.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Let's see, we might have one more. There's a lot of energetic comments here. Let's see here. I'm not sure if you have this ready, but there's a question. Would you please display an independent claims map to show what it would look like? You may need to save that for a separate presentation, I'm guessing.
That one will take a while. So, but again, good question. Really
But
good
I just
question.
wanted to share with you the comments here. We have a comment. I can't wait for the next patent story by Janal. And same here. And then thank you for this fascinating webinar.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I did. I was looking for an old map that I had prepared on deep brain stimulation and the origins of that. And man, I did an inventor map for that. And it was absolutely fascinating because it shows kind of the culture of medical devices, which I think may be different than for batteries, which is that basically have small groups of inventors that move on from company to company, most of which they're starting up. And so each new iteration creates a new ripple in the technology, and you can see that in these types of citation maps. It's quite fascinating.
Well, that's great. So maybe you do have more patent stories and patent maps to talk about in future presentations because people seem to really enjoy this.
Okay, I enjoy putting it together, so thank you.
Well, if you have any additional questions, Pete, please feel free to email Janelle. I'm sure she'd be delighted to talk about anything that we didn't cover here in the presentation. And again, slides for today's presentation are available in the chat if you click on the link there, and a link will be emailed to you also. So thank you so much for your attendance. The next SLW Life Sciences Seminar is currently planned for Tuesday, March 18th, and I hope you'll tune in to that next seminar. Thank you so much.